Alright guys, gals, and everything in between, in case you were wondering, yes, this is in fact a 10 Cloverfield Lane shirt, which means that yes, it's gonna mess with the green screen a little bit, but I wanted to rock a 10 Cloverfield Lane shirt. So, Cloverfield Paradox came out a couple days ago, surprisingly, and we all saw the movie. Whether you loved it or hate it, it has sparked conversation, and it has been a worthwhile and fun time for us Cloverfield fans. I'd like to get into a little bit of the spoilers of the film, and I'd like to just talk about the timeline in general and where things are and in line. Just so you know, not all of this could necessarily be correct. The beauty of Cloverfield is a lot of it is open-ended, which means a lot of it is speculative, which means that if I'm wrong about something, I mean, how dare someone be wrong about guessing on the internet, but generally speaking, I have a pretty good track record with the Cloverfield universe if you've seen my other videos, so let's do this. I just have to say right off the bat, I still, once again, enjoyed the hell out of this film. Even with the space stuff, which I criticized, I still enjoyed it. I've rewatched it about 5 times now, and I have to say that a lot of my criticisms of the film are with the sentient arm. So if you're one of the people who has an issue with the sentient arm, you're not alone. The sentient arm made no sense, because whether it be the full human from the other dimension, does that mean he's lying on the ground the whole time? Does the other guy in the other dimension have a missing arm and somehow they're communicating to each other? Either way, the sentient arm made no sense. How they could have done that is if the arm just is spazzing out, it would have worked for the trailer for that creepy, weird looking scene. Then they could have had a scene that they're like, oh, you know, the displacement of where we were, there's a lot of weird electrical energy going out, and it caused the arm to be impulsy and electric-y. So I have to say that is where I think they should have gone with it, and they didn't, but that's perfectly fine. And I have to say, the Earth story, why that was one of my favorite things is it felt like we were living Cloverfield, because they always said that one of their ideas was seeing another perspective on the same night. Now, a lot of people are like, does that take place in 2008? No, it does not. It takes place in 2028. So this is Earth 2, essentially, getting the events of Cloverfield at the same time as Cloverfield, more or less, if that makes sense. I'll get into more of that later. But Cloverfield, seeing it as a different perspective, seeing multiple Cloverfield monsters, essentially. And I really wish, and I'm wondering if when they were going to release this in theaters, I wonder if they were going to have the visual effects of the actual Cloverfield monster to give it more production value, because they don't show the monster until the very end in this film. And when they show Clover again, the Cloverfield monster has returned, everybody. And that was such a glorifying moment for me, because I've always said Clover's gotta come back. And yes, he's there for one scene. And I heard one group, and their name is Double Toasted, and Double Toasted I normally agree with and love, but they were talking about how this film, the last shot is kind of a big fuck you. And I say no. This was a cool moment. I personally loved the last shot, because I've waited for years to see Clover, and it was such a cool moment, because you don't see the Cloverfield monster throughout the movie, and you're like, is it? Or is it a 10 Cloverfield Lane situation where it could be something else? And then all of a sudden when it's like, tell them not to come back, and they're like, why? Why? And Clover comes out, and it's just like, oh yes! I loved seeing Clover pop out, and it wasn't the Clover from Cloverfield. It was one of the adults, because that Clover is a baby. And so it was really cool seeing that. We finally got a grown-up, full-scale Clover, which made me say that I love how they're handling the Cloverfield monster personally. Because if you look at it, Cloverfield in a weird way is kind of like an H.P. Lovecraft anthology. Because H.P. Lovecraft wrote all of his books in the same universe. So Cthulhu was never really there. Cthulhu had moments that he showed up and did his thing, but he was never a major story element. And they're kind of treating the Cloverfield monster like this unstoppable deity that's just like there. And it's kind of like a Godzilla thing, but but they're treating him more like Cthulhu, and then the rest of the mythos in the universe are going on at the same time that Clover is out there doing this thing that's evil, and people are going nuts and all this stuff. I see a huge Cthulhu resemblance to Clover. Also, I love that we got the wrap-up that we wanted in terms of that satellite falling from the sky, so people can finally stop saying that's the monster at the end of Cloverfield. Personally, for those of you guys who don't know, there was a long time ago when everyone kept saying, is it a monster or a satellite that's falling at the final frames of Cloverfield? And now we know it is the space station from Cloverfield Paradox. That as it travels back in time, that crashes, causing the events of Cloverfield. That was a cool little element to see. And then we also got Mark Stambler, which shows that the Stamblers are in fact a prevalent force in the Cloverfield universe. And Howard, of course, has been a conspiracy theorist. And where did he get the idea of monsters, demons from the sea? Which, again, I have to subscribe to my theory, which, as much as I've been talked down about this, my theory is that they are in the same universe and in the same continuum. And you know what? That's not a far-fetched theory. And everyone, for some reason, has the hardest problem dealing with this. And then it's like, oh, well, see, they're all in different universes. No, not really, and not necessarily. And I'll get to the universe lineup in just a moment. Because personally, the biggest elements of this are the fact that we're starving for resources. It's 2028. We need something else, and we have desperation, so we launch our satellite with this Hadron Collider in order to try and get unlimited resources. And that, coming back in, is, in all reality, one of the leaked synopses that we had was that we were also using technology from an alien war, because Earth is being ravaged, or was ravaged, by war. And if that is the case, and they brought up that everyone was kind of on the brink of war and tension, then the alien invasion in 10 Cloverfield Lane did in fact happen. The Stamblers are there. So this is kind of a bootstrap paradox. For those of you who don't know, the bootstrap paradox is, imagine you love Beethoven, you love the works of Beethoven, you go back in time only to find out that Beethoven never existed, but you wanted to get his sheet music signed. So you had his sheet music, you copied it down, you wrote down the works of Beethoven, you composed the score because you have a time machine, and you orchestrated it. You, without realizing it, became Beethoven. You are your own idol. But then how did you get the Beethoven sheet music in the first place if it hadn't existed yet if you went back in time? That is an actual theoretical physics, quantum physics and all that, called the bootstrap paradox. And more or less, from what I can tell, the Cloverfield paradox is a bootstrap paradox. Here we go. Let me break it down in detail. We're going to go through the timeline of how this all works. Okay, the Cloverfield station goes back in time also as well. Taggarato, according to the ARG, from even before, had been experimenting with time and sort of parallel worlds in that theory. So, they go back in time. Their station crashes. We saw that from the news footage. 2008. Rob is filming from the Cloverfield Paradox that technically came after. It crashes into the water. So, Taggarato goes out to investigate in the water. They find their own device. That wakes up the Cloverfield monster, results in the destruction of the Chuai station, which then causes the events of Cloverfield. The events of Cloverfield happen, Clover in it dies. So, the baby is dead. So, the events of Cloverfield Paradox technically haven't happened yet, but now we have that. So, now we have 10 Cloverfield Lane. The monster is dead. Years go by, the aliens who were observing this world with all of that through Howard, Howard essentially is no longer the reason for the satellite crashing, which was my theory that I was wrong on. But now, all of a sudden, the aliens arrive because the Cloverfield monster is dead, because that's one of the most viable theories I find, is that they were observing this young baby. And so, they come and attack in 2016. So they attack and mostly destroy the world, but we started taking it back. Mary Elizabeth Winstead was fighting a revolution. They were taking it back and fighting these aliens, and the threat caused us to be starved for resources. So our starved resource world was fought due to an alien invasion, which also causes people to say maybe they weren't necessarily aliens, because you could always have naysayers. Countries start tensioning up because this whole invasion happened. People want each other's resources. We're on the brink of war. Tagerato at this point has fully built their collider and built their station. So they put the station up in the air. So Cloverfield Paradox technically does take place afterwards. But then the events of Cloverfield Paradox happen, and they go back in time through the other dimension, cause the events. So it's ultimately, it's one timeline that's all in the same continuous universe, but it's in both places, and that's kind of the theory. I was talking to people, and I looked at videos, and I had one guy who was like a quantum physicist or whatever, and he said this is the most viable option. So I'm gonna run with the quantum physics guy. We have the Cloverfield Paradox ultimately causing the beginning of the universe, even though it took place later. And so then that happens, the events of that film happen, they go down. Which means now, after the alien invasion, mamas arrived. They said it felt like a nuclear explosion hit, which means that there was definitely an impact when the Cloverfield parent arrived. So regardless of whether it traveled through space, or whether it appeared here due to the paradox, which it more than likely appeared due to the paradox because it seems to have synced up these Cloverfield monsters. So there was the baby and the mom, which it would actually make sense that the baby and the mom, maybe even together, were separated through the time continuum. So the baby went to one part of the universe, and the mother went to the other. That, I think, is an infinitely interesting possibility over the course of one timeline. So, I hope you guys liked my theory of this is all one timeline. It just happens to be one giant bootstrap paradox, hence the title, the Cloverfield Paradox, where we have a sort of hadron collider causing the baby and the mama to be separated. That's why the baby's alone and scared. And that goes back to 2008, causing all of the events of the other Cloverfield films. And now we have the mother who's here and pissed off because baby's gone, where's my baby? But we also get a world of Cloverfield because there's multiple Cloverfield monsters in this film. So I have to say that there is more than likely a reality of Earth, which was a planet of Cloverfield monsters, that now has synced itself up with Earth, just displaced these monsters throughout time, throughout the same continuum. It's just now we have a world of Cloverfield monsters. So I think that that's the most interesting theory. Once again, one continuous universe, it's just they were displaced throughout. So, I hope you guys liked my theory, at least regardless of whether you disagree or not. In my headcanon, I definitely think it's one universe and Cloverfield monsters are scattered throughout. Do you guys want to see more with the mother? Did you guys also enjoy the fact that I broke down a little bit of the Cloverfield Paradox spoilers, some of the smaller spoilers of what I liked and didn't like? But I'm going to keep doing these theory videos over time because Cloverfield Overlord comes out in October around my birthday. So you betcha I'm going to keep doing Cloverfield videos because I know you guys seem to like them. So don't forget to like and subscribe. What do you guys think? I love you guys. Cloverfield fans, you're right here for me. You're my besties. Love you guys.